Suicide Squad is a troubled movie. Rampant studio interference left the movie as a hacked up mess with a flashy filter applied on top. Well, what if I told you that the original plot of Suicide Squad was completely different, with characters like Harley Quinn, Joker, and Enchantress completely absent? Well, that's the movie we'll be discussing today, as we break down the development, plot, and evolution of the original version of Suicide Squad. The year was 2009, and it was an interesting time to be a fan of DC Comics-based films. The previous year had seen the release and overwhelming success of The Dark Knight, and that upcoming March saw the release of the highly anticipated movie adaptation of Watchmen. Though, at that point, outside of The Dark Knight's inevitable sequel and potentially a Green Lantern film, no plans that Warner Bros. Made for DC movies ever seemed to be concrete. In the preceding years, everything from a sequel to Superman Returns, to a George Miller-helmed Justice League film, to movies for Wonder Woman, Flash, and Green Arrow had all failed to get off the ground. It was against this backdrop that on February 25th of that year, Variety broke the news that Warner Bros. Was setting up Suicide Squad as a potential franchise to be produced by Dan Lin. Almost immediately after, The Hollywood Reporter broke that the movie was set to be written by Justin Marks, best known for writing Disney's live-action Jungle Book and a slew of other Unmade movies. The project quietly progressed for about 2 years, with Marks' latest draft of the script being submitted in early 2011. Though, the next time we'd publicly hear about the project would be in December of 2012, while promoting his newest film, Gangster Squad. Dan Lin was asked about Suicide Squad, and he had this to say. Suicide Squad has a script from Justin Marks, but that is on a hold right now. I think Warner Bros. Wants to finish their A-list stories first, and then we'll talk about stories like Suicide Squad. And with that, it seemed that Suicide Squad was on the back burner for the time being, before ultimately being released in an entirely different form in 2016. But before we get to how that happened, let's take a deep dive into the original plot of Suicide Squad. Our story begins at the Asmara International Airport in North Africa, under siege by a team of evil metahumans known as Onslaught. The team is comprised of Manticore, the bulletproof strongman, Ravan, an expert with throwing weapons who has a particular affinity for knives, Rustam, the leader of the team who can conjure a scimitar made of light, and Jin, the soul of a man existing as a living computer virus. Jin runs interference, disabling cameras and allowing them access to anywhere in the airport, and the others lay waste to a terminal, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake, eventually attacking a Russian airplane and stealing a steel briefcase from one of its passengers. In Boston, Floyd Lawton, the scrappy contract killer known as Deadshot, enters a diner after a close shave with the crime boss Vincent Tartaga. He's helped by a waitress named Zoe, and it's clear that they have some familiarity with each other, and that Lawton has a ton of love for this girl, though not romantic love. Zoe leaves and Lawton is confronted by a woman named Amanda Waller, who's trying to recruit him for his services. Lawton refuses, but then the room quickly starts to spin and he faints. Waller couldn't leave anything to chance, so she put something in his coffee. Lawton wakes up in the Belle Reve prison for superhumans, situated in the middle of a misty bayou. He's stripped of all of his personal belongings. Chief among them is his wrist-mounted pistols, his favorite weapon, and he's really broken up about it. He's put into a holding cell and meets Digger Harkness, who's being held in the adjacent cell. Curiously, his hands are encased in lead mitts. That night, the prisoners in the cell block are sedated and come to inside of a hangar, where they meet the clean-cut military man, Rick Flag. He explains to the prisoners that they have all been sentenced to death, but they've also been chosen for field rehabilitation. If they go on a mission with him and return alive, they'll be downgraded to a life sentence. Lawton dismisses the idea and tries to stage a breakout before he's swiftly detained and winds up in an interrogation room with Flag. And they go at it back and forth, Lawton questioning how a straight-laced soldier must have screwed up to wind up with the freaks. Flag deflects bringing up Zoe, and questions Lawton why he never told her the truth, that he's her father. In Moscow, Onslaught winds up breaking into the briefcase where they find a bunch of classified documents. Rustam digs through them until he finds exactly what he was looking for. A schedule. He gets frustrated and destroys the laptop housing Jin. Manticore and Ravan are confused until Rustam produces a photograph of their attack on the airport and tells them that their contact sent it over the American wire. The others then understand. Jin missed disabling one of the cameras. They can't have that kind of failure again. Back at Belle Reve, Flag and Waller audition a slew of superpowered prisoners before coming to a team comprised of Blockbuster, a chemically induced strongman, Multiplex, who can create duplicates of himself, Jakuli, a supersonic speedster, Mindboggler, the best telepath there is, Vixen, who could mimic the skills of animals, Captain Boomerang, Harkness, who can manifest plasma boomerangs and use them as special weapons, and Deadshot, the man who doesn't miss. The team is debriefed, and Flag brandishes a watch, explaining that if they get out of line or get too far away from him, the watch will automatically detonate explosives that were planted inside of them when they were sedated. As they leave, Waller tells Flag that she believes that there may be somebody within the American government assisting Onslaught. Waller is desperate, and this squad is all she's got. The team skydives onto their target, a moving freight train cutting through Siberia, contending with aerial drones on their way down. As they enter the train, they find that Multiplex was hit by one of the drones and is bleeding. Just as Flag assures him that they'll get him out, Blockbuster grabs Multiplex and throws him out of an open window, killing him and infuriating Flag. Meanwhile, Rustam and Manticore make their way deep into the train and locate what they've been searching for, a container marked hazardous material. They open the case and see the face of a frail old man named Fallout. Lawton, Flag, Jakuli, and Blockbuster come face to face with Manticore. He and Blockbuster begin to fight and eventually burst out of the side of the train. With enough distance, Blockbuster's explosive detonates, stunning Manticore but leaving him relatively unharmed. During the scuffle, Jakuli betrays Flag and Lawton, revealing himself to be a member of the Onslaught, and winds up getting shot by Lawton. Meanwhile, Harkness, Vixen, and Mindboggler wind up running into Ravan. He and Harkness get into a fight. He bests Harkness, but Mindboggler intervenes, and Ravan flees. But Harkness is upset that Mindboggler stole his kill. They continue through the train and wind up in a fight with Russian soldiers. In the scuffle, Harkness goes to cover Mindboggler, who's about to be ambushed, but then he reconsiders, still mad at her for ruining his kill. As a result, Mindboggler gets hit and doesn't make it. During all of this, the rest of Onslaught reunites and Fallout uses his power to destroy the train's braking mechanism, detaching the rear car they were in and causing the rest of the train to accelerate. Vixen and Harkness reunite with Flag and Lawton. Seeing no way out, they blow up the side of the train, and using an extra parachute that Lawton stole from their plane, they escape, deciding at the last second to bring the bleeding out Jakuli with them in the hopes to gather intel. They land in the snow, are found by the Russian military, and are sent to a Russian prison. In their cell, Flag and Lawton question a near-death Jakuli and learn all about Onslaught, how they were once agents of the government that were eventually cast aside and now want revenge, and that Fallout is essentially a human nuclear bomb, but he refuses to reveal where they're going to strike. Vixen gets tired of the investigation and mimics a poisonous viper. Poison drips from her fingertips into Jakuli's wound, leaving him inert and truthful. As he passes, he lets out one word: Boston. In the prison's courtyard, Flag and Lawton have a heart-to-heart about how he accidentally fathered Zoe, and how Flag disobeyed an order on one of his missions, leading to the death of 8 of his men, and how Waller promised him his stars back if he did this mission. They decide to stage a breakout. Flag and Lawton lure the prison's commandant into their cell and use him as a live shield as they escape. Harkness starts a prison riot, and Vixen finds the way out. Once they escape, Flag contacts Waller, and the remaining 4 members of the team are picked up by the American government. On an offshore aircraft carrier, they video call with Waller and tell her what they've learned. Flag eventually puts together that Onslaught is being funded by an American senator named Charles Cosgrove, who also happens to be running for president. The next night in Washington, D.C., the squad ambushes Cosgrove in his hotel room, where he reveals that he was helping Onslaught just until they got to Boston. He has a special forces team set up to apprehend them, and that this double cross is to show just how close we came to tragedy, and how he stopped it. He calls the special forces, but Rustam picks up the phone. Onslaught demolished every last one of them. The SWAT team closes in on the hotel room to dispatch the squad, but as they do, Cosgrove reveals that Onslaught will use Fallout to attack in 12 hours on the 4th of July in the North Church during the holiday parade. As SWAT closes in, the squad, for the first time, operates fully in sync, running a flank, incapacitating the SWAT members, and escaping from the hotel. The next morning, after getting debriefed, the squad approaches the church. Flag tells them that, according to intel, the only way to bring down Fallout is to stab him. No guns. Vixen and Harkness enter the church. Seeing Ravan, they begin to fight as Rustam and Fallout head underneath the church. In the catacombs, Fallout places his hands on the floor, and it begins to glow. Lawton appears about to dispatch Rustam, when Manticore appears with Zoe, holding her hostage. Rustam then tells Zoe that Deadshot is her father. Flag appears, firing at Manticore, but the bullets bounce off of him, and he flees with Zoe. Lawton takes off after him. Fallout's power shakes the earth, cracks start to form in the ground, and release a massive amount of gamma radiation into the area. The people at the parade start to scatter in panic. Flag baits both Rustam and Fallout to the same spot, tricking Rustam into accidentally stabbing Fallout with his light scimitar, killing him. The radioactivity begins to suck inward across the area, Rustam retreating as Fallout dies. Ravan and Vixen eventually wind up in a one-on-one fight in the church's bell tower, with Harkness locked out. He makes his way to the roof, and as Vixen is on her last legs, Harkness uses a boomerang to break into the tower, cut the bell down, and crush Ravan. Lawton bursts out of the church and sees Manticore stuff Zoe into the back of an armored truck. Lawton fires at him, and the bullets bounce off as he approaches. As Manticore picks up Lawton, he has an idea. Lawton fires into Manticore's mouth, ending him. The truck then speeds off, with Rustam driving. Lawton steals a police motorcycle and gives them chase, while Flag, Harkness, and Vixen follow close behind in their van. Lawton eventually mounts the back of the truck as the van tails him. He breaks into the back, gets Zoe out, and throws her to Harkness, who's standing in the van's sunroof. Flag then rams the back of the truck, flipping it off the road. Rustam and Lawton limp out and enter a standoff. And Lawton, knowing his daughter is watching on the side of the road, doesn't want to shoot. As he hesitates, Flag fires at Rustam, hitting him right between the eyes and ending the conflict. Lawton and Zoe reunite. He has so much that he needs to say to her. Zoe understands the gravity of the entire situation and just tells Lawton that she'll see him around. A week later, Waller gives Flag his stars back, but Flag declines, wanting to run more ops, and that all he needs are some new recruits to do it. In the hangar, two metahumans fight for a spot on the new squad. Sitting behind the recruiting desk are Vixen and Harkness, reveling in their newfound purpose and the promise of more time being taken off their sentence. Lawton is escorted out of the prison by Flag, who asks him why he's not taking another mission with the squad. Lawton turns to him and tells him it'd be suicide. Flag smirks and wishes him well on his prison transfer. As he gets onto the bus, Flag hands him a duffel bag, a goodbye gift, and tells him to open it on board. Flag returns to his room looking out the window. As the bus pulls away, Lawton opens the bag, filled with all of his personal belongings. Sunglasses, passports, and his wrist-mounted pistols, accompanied by a single clip of live ammo. The bus grinds to a halt as Lawton exits and looks back at the prison, gratefully. Flag turning away from the window, smiling to himself. Floyd Lawton saunters off into the bayou, finally accepting himself for what he is. A criminal. Flawed, but capable of doing good. And maybe that's good enough for now. I think this movie is neat. Is it groundbreaking? Not really, but it is way more focused than the final product. Characters have motivations and flaws, they talk to each other about the situation, and grow by the end of the movie. It's a simple story for sure, but it definitely has enough novel ideas and character moments that feel earned, that it would have been at the very least a decently watchable movie. So that raises the question, with this solid foundation in place, why did it change? Between the time that the movie was revealed in 2009 and Dan Lin stating that the movie was on hold in 2012, the superhero movie landscape had changed dramatically. Marvel was finding great success in the early days of their cinematic universe, and Warner Brothers wanted in on that same kind of financial success and audience goodwill. It was during this period that they began mapping out plans for a cinematic universe of their own. After a false start with 2011's Green Lantern, Warner's eyes were fixed on Zack Snyder's Superman reboot, Man of Steel, to be their ground zero. And upon the movie's release, the DC Extended Universe was born. Somewhere around this time, Suicide Squad was put back into active development, and Marx's script was used to pitch prospective directors on joining the film in 2013 and 2014. Eventually, writer-director David Ayer signed on to direct in September of 2014, shortly before the release of his film, Fury. By this point, Warner Brothers had their plans for the DCEU set. They were so firm on these plans that they revealed them publicly less than a month later. When Ayer signed on to direct, he also wanted to rewrite the script from scratch, which, since the movie was already dated and marketing deals were already in place, he had only about 6 weeks to rewrite the movie from scratch. Ayer's original first draft of the script tied into the Justice League storyline that Zack Snyder was building up in his movies featuring parademons and Steppenwolf, so presumably, Ayer rewrote the movie to more cohesively fit it into the overall DC Extended Universe, as opposed to the more standalone nature of the original story. As plans shifted for the DCEU, those plot points were dropped, and that would be the first major change in a long line of major changes that eventually culminated in the mess that was the final film. I think it's a real shame that the original version of this movie never saw the light of day, especially when compared to what we did get. The original draft was a solid, self-contained story with stakes that were high, but not world-ending. And if this version, or something similar to it, was released in 2016, since it was so standalone and simple, I think it would have been seen as really refreshing. But that's the story of the original version of Suicide Squad, and the end of yet another episode of Canned Goods. So until next time, have a beautiful day, be good to each other, and stay Hemmas.